Max Muncy and Tommy Edman started their rehab assignments tonight with OKC. I know Muncy had a double that Edman scored on. I think Edman might have had a single. Both played 6 innings. So, it's looking there. Dave said they're probably about a week or so away. So, I mean, they won't be first to return. That'll be Mookie Monday, Walker Buehler likely Wednesday. Even Ryan Brazier, who's supposed to be, he'll be back during the Cardinal series. Dave didn't say when, but my guess would be, probably one of the first, probably Friday to start it. And that could potentially line up with Muncy and Edman. I know in your interview with Katie about Edman, she mentioned that, that would be an interesting series for him to be back in St. Louis. So I think the Dodgers are going to want to make that happen as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, looking at the box score, Edman was 1 for 3 with a single and a run scored tonight. And then Max Muncy was 1 for 2 with a double, an RBI, and a walk. So, again, I don't think any of us are like overly concerned about the numbers here. It's just getting these guys reps. If anything, I'd love to hear how, Edman did in center field. Basically would be a more interesting report to me, just because he had started a rehab assignment with St. Louis, but had not been playing the field yet. So the fact that he was in center field, I think was a positive one for the Dodgers. Of note, by the way, Justin Robleski, 5 2/3, 5 hits, 5 walks, 5 strikeouts, 2 earned runs. So, not exactly the most encouraging start from Robleski down in AAA. But I mean, Daniel, it's what's interesting is, let me ask you this. I'm going to sort of, as all these guys come back, I think we've talked about this. There's some fascinating roster decisions that the Dodgers are going to make. And Matt and I, when we talked earlier this week, it was like this quote about Nick Ahmed. And it was like, hey, what happens to Nick Ahmed when Butts comes back? And he's like, well, we're going to have some tough decisions to make, that kind of thing. I think Nick Ahmed's sticking around if Mookie's playing right field. Like, I think there's a non-zero chance that if Rojas can't play shortstop every single day, which it doesn't seem like he can, at least not yet. Like, I mean, I don't know who they're going to move, because Ahmed still seems to make the most sense. But if Betts isn't playing shortstop, like, do they have to keep him around? Which, by the way, Ahmed, like, sneaky, like, not terrible offensively. I mean, given the standards that we've been accustomed to this year, I mean, like, a 240 batting average, like, is fine for me. So what do they do when Mookie comes back Monday, and then let's say Friday, Edman and Muncy both come back? I mean, who are the 3 guys that get moved?
Yeah, I think that's the key. Like, you might, like, a guy like Nick Ahmed might survive Mookie now that Mookie's playing the outfield, but he ain't surviving Muncy and Edman. There's you're talking about 3 moves here. Like, I think Pages will probably get optioned. Where we've seen
he's the only guy that has options, by the way, not necessarily because he deserves it the most, but because he's the one guy they can remove from the roster without losing permanently.
Yeah, and I would be curious, like, as opposed to, I guess they're going to need 40-man spots for all 3 of these guys, right? If I'm not
just the 2, not Mookie, just the last 2.
Okay, just so 2. They're going to need 2 40-man spots, which means, like, I think Nick Ahmed gets DFA'd for one of those. I think that's kind of an easy one, and then the other one, Kevin Kiermaier, is probably next on the list. But if you like his defense in center field, then, like, you maybe you throw Jason Hayward back on the IL. Like, someone goes on the IL. I really don't know. Like, unless Kiermaier is getting DFA'd, I don't know what the easy answer is. And Chris Taylor is another name who's maybe gonna be back eventually here. So obviously he's not someone you're rushing to clear a roster space for, but we're probably going to see him at some point again. So a lot of tough decisions here. And I guess that's a good problem to have, as opposed to not really having anyone. Obviously, whoever you're subtracting to bring back Mookie, Muncy, and Edman, like, that's a huge upgrade. So you'll, like, as tough as a problem as it is, like, you're happy to make it.
Yeah, looking at the depth chart, to your point, Matt, Muncy and Edman are both on the 60-day IL, and the 40-man roster is full. So 2 people will have to be moved off of the 40-man, which could very well coincide with some of these moves. So if they've got to clear 3 spots, we mentioned Pages, especially if Mookie's going to be playing right field. Pages seems like an obvious choice because he can be optioned. So that's one. The other 2 spots, I mean, the guys that are in contention, I would say, are Ahmed, Kike Hernandez, Ahmed Rosario, who, like, never plays, Jason Hayward, and Kevin Kiermaier. Like, 2 of those 4 or 5 guys, based on the Kike quotes, I think he's pretty safe. Again, like, I guess Kike or Ahmed Rosario could technically play shortstop behind Miguel Rojas. But if you move Pages, you probably need to keep Kiermaier around, because as much as we hate Pages in center, like they don't really have anybody, a ton of other options out there either. So, I mean, Jason Hayward, to your point, Daniel, feels like the obvious guy here. Matt, do you think it's good? I mean, tell me the alternative. I agree with you. My reaction is the same as yours, but unless it's Kiermaier and Ahmed, do you think it's those two?
I think those are the guys. I
hope so.
I think Ahmed has done well in the role, but they have enough coverage at shortstop. They can put. I know Rosario is. I think they're saving Rosario is what they're doing. They're preserving him for once they DFA Ahmed, and then they're going to have a full blown opportunity for Rosario. He'll be ready to go, nice and rested. I think he's an option to play shortstop. Kike can play shortstop if he needs to. Even Edman can play shortstop. So I think Ahmed, and I think Kiermaier. He's already been DFA'd once. He cleared waivers and was still with the team. So I think the Dodgers will run the risk of just DFAing him, hoping he clears waivers again, and then they could re-sign him to a minor league deal and then let him spend, the next 5 weeks with OKC, or maybe they then bring him up once active rosters expand. Maybe he's the one position player they call up, and so he's only down in the minors for a brief period. And that is rolling the dice, because there's no guarantee. Like, somebody could decide, he made a great catch for the Dodgers that night, and now we want him playing center field for us. So I feel like that's where that ends up going. I know, Hayward hasn't lived up to kind of his bounce back season last year, but it also helps to be Freddie Freeman's best friend. So yeah, I think it is Ahmed and Kiermaier.
And
go ahead, Daniel.
Sorry. I do think if there's another 40-man move, I do think they could also just throw Kiermaier on the 10-day IL. Just so you don't lose him completely, and you have him kind of ready to go. I don't know how hurt Chris Taylor is at the moment, if we're being completely honest. He probably, if they needed him, he could be active right now. But get the guys who aren't hitting, it's fine to just send them to Camelback Ranch for a couple weeks, work on their swing or whatever, and then if other injuries happen, then you could activate them or send them on a rehab assignment and then bring them back. So I think in a perfect world, you would like to keep them, guys like that in the organization, but there are only so many 40-man spots to go around, and they are going to need to open up 2 of them. And obviously DFAing Ahmed and Kiermaier would kind of be the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, and just so 2 things. One, September 1st is when rosters expand. So I had the same thought as you, Daniel. Is throw one of these guys on the IL for a couple weeks and just tell them, hey, on September 1st, you'll be back and you'll just be on the roster. But the problem is, you just referenced the Dodgers. There are no obvious, normally you're okay, what, Nick Ramirez, is he floating around somewhere on the 40-man roster? Those guys aren't on here. If we're talking about guys that have spots, they're not on the 60-day IL. Here are the names: Nick Frasso, Kyle Hurt, Landon Knack, Bobby Miller, Michael Peterson, Justin Robleski, Diego Cartaya, Hunter Fiducia, and James Outman. Those are the dudes that are in the minor leagues and on the 40-man roster. Now, if you go 10-day IL, you add guys like Chris Taylor, Mookie Betts, obviously, Blake Trinan, Brusdar Graterol, Walker Buehler. So, I mean, those are the guys which we haven't even talked about. Walker Buehler, by the way, is going to need a spot on the active roster, but that's a pitching side. So, I mean, maybe is it depending on Gratterall's health, do some of these guys go to the 60? But my point is just to the Kiermaier and Ahmed conversation. There's not an obvious, we'll DFA this guy and then we'll just slip somebody onto the IL, because none of the hitters that I just mentioned, are guys that are going to be DFA'd. I mean, Hunter Fiducia would be as close as possible, but that wouldn't make a ton of sense to me, given sort of the trajectory he's been on and just sort of the role he might play in years to come. Michael Peterson, these are the only guys really. But again, I think both those guys have value on the 40-man. So, Matt, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I figured it out.
Okay.
Brent Honeywell, thanks for coming, but we need a 40-man spot. Nick Frasso, Kyle Hurt, they could get recalled and then put on the 60-day IL to open up 40-man spots. That's an option.
Which do they accrue? I forget. I mean,
it will start. I mean, that is the trade-off. Yes,
they accrue service time and they get paid big league money. So I'm sure either of those guys would be definitely on board with that.
I mean, yeah, I think the Dodgers will just sort of bite the bullet at this point to figure it out.
Also, like if River Ryan, if his MRI comes back, whatever,
Sure.
he might go straight to the 60-day, and that opens up a spot right there. So, well, someone could get injured this week as well. Like, you know, for all we know, like the way this has been going. So,
and Ryan Brazier, by the way, will need a 40-man spot as well. Sorry if I cut you off there, Matt.
No,
but he's also on the 60-day IL.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. The Dodgers
and Yamamoto, if Yamamoto comes back, he's on the 60-day IL.
The good thing is the Dodgers have a very creative and smart front office that I'm sure they'll find a way to make all this work. And like Daniel said, you know, maybe hang on to the guys that they want to sort of keep in the organization without possibly losing them on waivers.